Wonderful welcome to Diversity, a podcast on all things diversity, equity, and inclusion, brought to you by the Confederation of Indian Industries, CII, and Avtar, the Power of Diversity. Today, in this episode, I have with me somebody who's very colorful, very energetic, very passionate, someone who loves what he does, but more than anything else, makes everybody love what he does. So I have with me Parmesh Shahani, head Godrej DEI Lab, and author of that massive bestseller, Queeristan. Welcome to the show, Parmesh.
I'm so happy. Thank you, Dr. Saundarya, as a fan of yours for so many years, as someone who's really, really admired the way you have built Avtar and the way you've been a champion of not just women's inclusion, but also all the other intersecting dimensions like LGBTQI+, PWD, and so many others. It's an honor to be with you on this podcast. Diversity, Diversity Coffee, whatever your choice of beverage, you have to be inclusive to everyone who's listening.
Fabulous, fabulous. And thank you so much for your kind words, Parmesh. I think this is such a magnificent journey that we all are in together. And, every time I speak to you, Parmesh, and I'm not going to lie, it's like, there is that complete energy of every color of the rainbow, truly, which emanates from you. And every single mail, I mean, you're just writing a mail, inviting me somewhere. And the way that entire warmth and empathy and compassion comes through in that mail, that's just so beautiful. So I'm going to, jump right in and ask you this question. This avatar of yours, which you are today, I presume that that's obviously taken, a lot of time and growth and self-awareness and really, focusing on your own self-development. Can you tell me, when did that moment of truth begin, where you realized that, you're going to be this awesome person who is going to do so much of work in the space and be the voice of thousands of voiceless folks? When did that moment of truth happen, Parmesh?
So actually, I never wanted to or planned to or any of this. And even now, I'm actually an introvert. So for me, but in the work I do, it's vital, I think, for all of us that we are 51% on the side of hope and optimism always, even though the 49% of what we experience on a daily basis is despair. So I think I work a lot on really looking at, the positives, whether in life, whether in the work we do, whether in the world. And so, but it's not something that comes naturally to me. I grew up as a shy and sensitive child, and I was often bullied in school because I'm 48 now. So I was born in 1976. So I grew up in a 1980s, 1990s India. And but I think many of our listeners who might be listening are, millennials, Gen Z, who cannot even imagine a world without computers or a world without cell phones. So for me, growing up, it was a journey of articulation. I always knew that I happened to be, gay, but I think while growing up, that it wasn't like you can go to Google and find out or ask Siri or any of these things like kids can do today, right? It was about books, it was about learning, it was about understanding your own self, it was about trying to survive in a rather oppressive, social structure in that sense. So I was often bullied in school, but you spoke about my brightness and my optimism and my positivity. I think I made a decision early on in life that I'm not going to succumb. And I think that was one thing that I did. So I remember, and I write about this in Queeristan, it was, I think, the 9th standard. It was my school's sports day. And I used to love bright colors growing up. And I wore these, neon green. Madonna was big in those days. So I got neon green Madonna shorts, like shorts with her pictures on it. For all our younger listeners, Madonna was the Taylor Swift of our generation. Ask your parents. So, I was so happy. But then when I went to school, when I went for the sports day, my classmates, etc., bullied me, pulled my pants down, embarrassed me in front of everyone else. And I went back home running and crying. Now, it would have been very easy at that time to conform and say, maybe let me not wear my neon Madonna shirts, let me conform, let me try and fit in. But I think I took a call at that time that, I'm right. This is who I am. So I will not be, uh, you know, squashed into submission by the world. In fact, I'm going to create a world in which everything can coexist, including my bright Madonna shorts. And so I think that was an early realization that, come what may, I'm going to be myself. And I think years later, it's translated into so many other things. But when I think and I look back, what is the source of that? Um, but again, it's not easy because, in the work we do is full of stress. It's full of challenges.
Yes.
For every good thing that happens, there are a few not so good things that happen. So I think I always orient myself towards, I remember that young version of me who chose to be himself and who chose to always orient himself in the direction of positivity and hope. And I continue.
Parmesh, big hug to the little you. And, when I hear you say that with so much of heart, so much of vulnerability, one thought that immediately comes to my mind is, why is this stereotyping going on? What is that, whatever information that's filled the heads of children, adults, people who are in the workplace, customers, just about everybody, every cohort that
Yeah.
has been trained on certain types of beliefs, certain types of what should be the way things should be, how
Yeah.
the way things should be, and because of which they kind of really behave so badly towards anything that's not them or anything that
Yeah.
doesn't conform. I
Yeah.
mean, this kind of stereotyping, you must have now faced it. Of course, the beginning of it was very harsh, brutal sort of entry into that awareness that you received at school. But I think through life, all of us, and while of course there's no way one can compare, what a second career woman goes through after
Yeah.
she's taken that break, and what a person from the community, from the LGBTQ or queer community goes through. The fact that both of these people are struggling against the imposition of certain stereotypes
Yeah.
is, I think, the common factor. Why do you think this happens? Why do you think these stereotypes? Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
it's many things. And I don't want to say that this is for minor, because LGBTQ people happen to be 6 to 10% of any population. Persons with disabilities happen to be 10 to 15%, because you have permanent and you have temporary disabilities
Yes.
and so on.
Yeah.
And women still, despite our best efforts to kill women from fetus level all the way up to adulthood, are still about 50%. So we can't even say it's a majority or whatever, because even when women are 50% of the world, women are discriminated against so consistently at every life stage. So I think it has to do, it is, so much of our industry is based on, bias, de-biasing, and so on. But I think it's the way that historically, patriarchy has established itself. It's the way that masculinity is coded in toxic ways, without realizing that it's unnatural. Because if you look at nature, right, you look at Prakriti, you look at nature, diversity is what makes everything beautiful. Diversity is what makes the plant kingdom beautiful. Diversity is what makes our, so many wonderful animals in the world. Diversity is what makes, in terms of food, right? You can't just, imagine eating only pizza all day. I mean, don't you want some chocolate? Don't you want some nimbu pani, right? Diversity is diversity all around us. And it is the differences that make us wonderful and beautiful, and the differences are our strength. But I feel like it's tragic that we're evolved in so many ways, including science, technology, spirituality. There are so many evolutionary journeys we're on, but we can't shake off this baggage of, say, discrimination,
Absolutely.
all around the world, whether on something like gender, whether on something like religion, whether on something as basic as race. To make these elements, which are which are variants and nothing else. It's nothing intrinsic about you. But to make these, the basis of, centuries of discrimination to me seems rather silly and, unevolved, given
Yeah,
where we
yeah.
live in the world, on spiritual journeys as well as scientific and technology journeys. So I'm hoping that, us and the next generation stop all this nonsense.
I really hope so too. And you spoke about Nimbu Pani, and then I remembered fresh lime soda.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, you make it so difficult for any of your introducers to introduce you, Parmesh. And you speak on so many forums, and do you know what a challenge you present to people who try to somehow pack all of that glorious diversity in your own experience profile into
Yeah.
something that can be said in, like, I don't know, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Too difficult. But
Yeah.
I want to say this, and when I'm just looking at the amazing diversity of work that you've done, I think each of it had a kind of a destiny's role to play
Yeah.
in making you who you are. And
Yeah.
I just want you to pick up something. I mean, I'm just looking at this. Sony Entertainment Television AVP Business Development, teacher trainee, GD Somani Memorial High School, head vision and opportunities, looking at venture capital initiative for Mahindra and Mahindra. I mean, see, listen, it's good to be diverse, but then what is this? This is like just tons of stuff, which is an L magazine. I just loved that magazine.
Yeah. I was
Real
part of the
title.
team that started. It was the first international fashion magazine in India.
I know. And
And,
it was a fashion magazine with a difference.
correct.
I think it talked about not just the high street fashion models, but it also talked about just people. And there are some articles in it which I really liked, and I think it contributed to some
Yeah.
article in the L. But tell me, Parmesh, of all of these amazing experiences that have today made you who you are, what is it that kind of stays with you and feels that this is really what you were meant to do?
So I think, you can only connect the dots looking back. Even Steve Jobs did it. So many other people do it. When you're on the journey, you're just exploring. I've been really blessed that I've been able to, in my career, be part of the creative industries, be part of business, and be part of academia. And I think flowing across these three distinct, but in my mind, connected fields has enabled me to do what the Harvard professor, Dr. Homi Bhabha, calls the act of translation. Not as a linguistic translation, but as a conceptual translation, where you can actually see theories that are, debated and discussed in academia play themselves out in business and the creative industries. You can take experiences from the creative industries and business and inform academia. And it is in this, in the hyphenation between these spaces that actually society progresses. So I've been blessed that I live in the hyphen. Sometimes I flow on this end, sometimes I flow on that end. And I think it's, when I'm looking ahead, I think the future of the world is, if you look back at the history of knowledge itself, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people were not dividing knowledge into fields. Science, philosophy, literature were all connected. It's just, post-industrial revolution, post the way the world is developed, that people have gone into specific silos. But I think now in the world with AI, with the world of AI, in the world of, on one end, in the world of deep loneliness and fragmentation on the other, I think we are going to need to create, education and work models in which, different fields are synthesized. So we're going to have to train people differently. You can't train scientists thinking binary all the time, because then that's what you're going to get, right? You're going to get computer code, which is, which can only do certain things, right? You have to train people for plurality. And that only comes when you are like able to do a bunch of things, right? So I consider I know I'm rambling, but I consider all of these things.
Lovely. Please keep rambling. It's
Yeah.
lovely to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the fact that I was able to explore these different directions of mine, I consider it a great, fortune. We live in a world where, business agendas and interests are defining, policy and the planet more and more. So I really like being located here, where one can use one's, say, business location to really think about some of the larger picture issues that one can solve in the world. But I've had a blast. You spoke about limbu pani, so fresh lime soda was incredible, because at age 20, actually the most exciting youth experience of mine, and which has defined my life, was at age 20 when I think wearing those same neon green shorts some years later that I was bullied in, I walked into the office of Times of India and met the legendary editor Bachchi Karkaria. And I mean, for the younger listeners, there was a time when we would get our news in newspapers, and the newspapers would come to our house every day. We have to tell them because, people are like phones. And I'd read a weekend newspaper and I didn't like it. So somehow, I don't know what got into me. I went to the Times of India office. Security was lax in those days. So I got up. I managed to reach the office of the editor, and somehow I managed to get my way in. And I said, I'm a young reader of your newspaper, and I think this weekend was horrible. So she was like, A, who let you in? B, what are these shorts? and C, she was like, do you want a job? I'll hire you right now. And I was like, but I have zero experience and I'm in college. And she said, but you have attitude and you have passion. And, I can train you for skills. But this attitude and the spirit, I can't train you. I can't train anyone for. And so you have it. And so now you're going to work with me. And if you think the newspaper is bad, you're going to help me make it better. So, I mean, it was incredible at that age to find someone who believed in you, who told you that I'm going to give you skills you need, but don't lose that spirit. But also who taught me very clearly the mantra I live by now, saying that if you have an issue with anything, make it better. Otherwise, it's all talk, right? So walk the talk. So I think that has informed everything. So whether it's Fresh Lime Soda, whether it's the magazines, whether it's the venture fund, and the way we were using reimagining Mahindra, or indeed it's all the different things I've been doing at Godrej. I think that spirit and that early mentorship is what has shaped my life, saying, let's make it happen.
Yeah, this is beautiful. And I had an opportunity to be on a panel with Bachi once.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this thing? This is one force of nature here.
Yeah.
And she was so amazing. The kind of what she spoke about, and weirdly, I think the kind of eclectic language and thoughts that you're using right now, I'm kind of reminded of her.
Yeah.
And I feel that influence must definitely have stayed with you, Parmesh, for all of these years.
Yeah. I've been blessed. I've had so many incredible mentors. I've most of them women, actually. I've been really, really blessed to be a part of institutions which have empowered and not squashed me. In the early part of my life, I went to schools and colleges that wanted to suppress me. But thankfully, I went to places like MIT, which said, how can we create, bridges for you to come over and flourish instead of walls that will enable you to kind of, be, not able to imagine or be a better future. So I've been very blessed institutionally and person-wise in my life, and which is why I've always, I'm always trying to kind of create these bridges for everyone else.
Everybody else. Yeah. You talked about being blessed with great institutions, but I think the Godrej DEI Lab is an institution you have created. And I remember back in, I don't know, maybe 2011 or 12 or something, I think we met at some conference in Mumbai, and you were actually kind of, talking about your vision for the lab. And I was, see, I also come from a space where we pitch ideas constantly.
Yeah.
And, maybe out of 10 ideas, half an idea gets picked and sold.
Yeah.
And, you're able to do something about it. And you do it not because of your identity of a second career woman or a person from the LGBTQ community or anything. You do it because of the force of your personality, your intentionality, and the fact that the person there sitting opposite you is not able to say no to that energy. Yeah. So I want you to tell me, how did Godrej DEI Lab actually happen?
So it was built, so, in 2010, 2011, we launched something called the Godrej India Culture Lab. And that itself was a spin-off of the think tank that I had run at MIT. Then I went off to start a PhD program, which I dropped out of because of various reasons, but I blame Shah Rukh for all the major decisions of my life. If he hadn't made this movie called Swades, I wouldn't have seen it when I was in a, on a cold Boston night and cried and said, "Mujhe bhi apne desh wapas jana hai." Maybe I would have had some nice international husband and some nice.
I know. Yeah, let's all blame Shah Rukh. I'm also all for blaming him.
So Shah Rukh has ruined my ideas about love. Now I tell my partner, but Shah Rukh does like this so romantic. He's like, shut up and sit in a corner. I'm like, Bollywood's not like that. You're supposed to be romantic. So Shah Rukh has ruined my ideas of everything, including, but anyway, I'm glad I decided
now.
to come him back. And,
Yeah.
we had started a lab in MIT called the Convergence Culture Lab, where we looked at media convergence as a cultural process, not a technological endpoint.
Okay.
And a couple of years later, I was I was in the first batch of the TED Fellows, where I went to a TED conference in 2009. And it was, TED at that time, now TED is a meme because there are so many TEDx's and so many things. But at that time, it was quite revolutionary to have a space where you can talk about agriculture, science, religion, spirituality, technology, all one after the other in an interconnected kind of way. So I had been thinking a lot about, how do we, create a space where we can examine the changes taking place in contemporary India over a long period of time through scholarship, through events, through pop-ups, through other kind of interventions. It was a random idea. Someone introduced me to Nisa Godrej. We thought we would talk for about 20 minutes. We landed up spending the whole day together, talking about everything from books to ideas to, love to everything. And at some point, she was like, I still don't know what your Culture Lab idea is, but why don't you come on board and experiment with it? So it was, one of those random serendipitous or maybe planned things, who knows? Because the more I look back, I look at how many of these things are like woven threads. And so that's when our journey happened and we evolved as a lab. We said, we started off as an event space, then we moved on to a fellowship space, then we moved on to a knowledge space, then we moved on to a thinking space. And throughout, we were looking at underserved themes. So we were looking at gender, we were looking at sexuality, we were looking at rural-urban circularities. We were looking at technology, education. We were looking at whose voices are not being heard in India. So it ran as a very successful 10-year experiment. But after COVID, I decided that I thought that, the Culture Lab format and that time was good. It was a successful 10-year experiment. Queeristan, my book had just come out, and I really wanted to, take the book to various places. So I took a hiatus for about a year and a half. And when I came back, we together decided that I said that, maybe I'm becoming older, or maybe post-COVID, I don't want to do a culture lab, which is so broad and all encompassing. I want to be super focused. And so Nisa and me together came up with the idea of, what if we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion? What if we create a lab-like space which will have two elements? One bit will be to push, force, cajole, urge, nudge, threaten our Godrej Industries group of companies to be more inclusive, doing whatever it takes. So policies, processes, love, carrot, stick, everything. But the other to kind of become a public space, to become a knowledge resource, to partner with academic, universities, to further DI knowledge ahead, so that we can tell other companies in India, we can work with policymakers, we can really talk about why inclusion benefits everyone. So that's how the lab came about, and it's been a year and a half since we started it. And I'm so excited. I go to work every morning. It's amazing because on any given day, I could be doing anything from recording a podcast to looking at the CEO's goal sheets, to doing a sensitization training, to running an ERG on the floor of a factory in Madhya Pradesh. I mean, wow.
Gorgeous. You're living the dream. You're really living the dream. That's
Yeah,
what I can say. And
I'm
thanks
very
to
lucky.
Shah Rukh for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Shah Rukh. Eventually it all paid off.
Yeah. But what are the challenges that companies really face? And now you're on that side,
Yeah.
where you're looking at, the broad picture, and you just described what, people do, standing on the shop floor and, changing minds
Yeah.
and making sure that, what are the challenges you think that companies really face in creating an inclusive environment? What is it? What prevents them?
So I think, first of all, many companies think that DEI is something you do. Ki DEI karna hai. DEI is not something you do. DEI is a lens with which you look at everything that the business does, right? It's not like, let's do sustainability. You can't do sustainability. You have to be sustainable at every step of the way. Just like we can't do inclusion. It's not like a button. You have to reframe everything that you do, right? So I think one challenge is people don't get it. People don't get that it's comprehensive, that it spans, of course it spans hiring, but it's also product. It's also product design. It's also accessibility in product. It's also communication, representation. It's also linking it to CSR. It's about policy. It's about everything, right? So one challenge is that people don't get it. People say, let's do DI, let's hire some women. So, or, or the second thing is people think it's a stretch role. People don't really think that it's something which is a field by itself.
Exactly.
Targets, goals, outcomes, and it needs to be measured, right? The third thing is people don't realize that it has to be, someone has to be accountable for it, and mostly senior leaders have to be. Like one of the big changes we've done at Godrej is that on anyone who's vice president and above, 15% of the goal sheet is inclusion and sustainability goals, come what may. So now suddenly you're accountable for it, right? So when you're accountable for it, when your salary is linked to it, you will pay the attention that it deserves, whether it is resourcing, whether it is thinking through some of these challenges, whether it is not accepting the nonsense that sometimes people come up with and say, like, you must be saying, oh, we want to hire more, we are not getting women. What do you mean you're not getting women? Have you tried? Have you thought of alternatives? Have you created pipelines? Have you spoken to the right people? What does this mean? But, when you're accountable for it, when your 15% of your salary is linked to it, then suddenly you'll ask these tough questions. You'll say, no, I don't buy that excuse. Try harder. And then
but Parmesh, when you say that, companies think that they're doing DEI, but it has to actually be a lens, and that was a beautiful way of, saying it. Companies are these, process-oriented, structures where input has to lead to output, and you have to have an ROI on everything. And, if that doesn't happen, then there's no point to it. So how do you get organizations to move away from the doing of DEI, doing of inclusion, but still actually do a lot of stuff? How do you
by being comprehensive, by working at every level, by starting with the top, by working with MDs and senior leaders, and first making them understand the facets of DI, just as they would. No one is born knowing accounts, or no one is born knowing sales. No one is born knowing marketing. Someone teaches you 4 Ps. Someone teaches you this is balance sheet, right? So same way, DI as a body, someone has to tell you, these are the elements of it, right? This is what bias looks like. This is what psychological safety looks like. This is what leadership looks like. This is what the world outside looks like. And this is what we don't look like. And here's the data that says that if we don't look like the world outside, we are going to suffer. So someone needs to do that, right? So one part of it is really working with, leadership, making them understand. The second is building in comprehensive budgets for the programming that needs to be done at every level. So, you want to work with Avtar, there's a cost involved. People need to understand that, right? Because it's a consulting. I mean, you're happy to pay Bain or BCG, but why do you squeal when it's Avtar? Just, for example, right? People need to understand that. There's a cost with consultants, there's a cost with resourcing, there's a cost to doing the training. There are various tweaks that you need to use. Policies need to be changed. There's a cost often to those. So people need to understand that these costs are actually investments in the future, that when you think about it, that when you make them, you see the future success of your organization. And then you have to come up with various ways of measuring, what you do. And for example, at Godrej, I'm really, really happy in the past 1 year that, on gender metrics, we really moved up in such an exciting way. Just to give you last quarter numbers, and everything that we do is put up in public. I think we're one of the only companies in India which has a public scorecard, right? So women representation all across our group is 29% all across. It's moved up by 2 percentage points over last year. 20% in leadership, that's moved up by 3 percentage points over last year. Women represented in blue collar for us is 31% now. It's moved up by 8 percentage points over last year. LGBTQ employees are close to 200, as opposed to maybe 120 or whatever. Persons with disabilities are about close to 200 as well. So we have to kind of find ways. I mean, do you measure numbers? Of course. And then you have to put some of this on the goal sheets. Do you measure belonging? Of course. Do you measure do you do accessibility audits of your facilities? Of course, because if your offices and factories are not accessible, how are people from these dimensions going to come here and flourish? Yeah. So I'm saying a lot of it is people don't realize that it's comprehensive hard work. It's long-term hard work. It only works when your senior leaders buy in completely and understand that they're doing it for the long term, just like with sustainability, just like with work-life balance, just like with policies. They're doing this so that they can ensure the longevity and the good success of their business.
Yeah,
so absolutely. To make to the future. And organizations that get it are doing the work, are investing, um, and are seeing their employees flourish, are seeing their profitability go up, are seeing their brand be burnished even further, and are, in a sense, they're understanding that the customers, vendors, everyone out there is going to continue supporting them. Organizations that are not may, in the short term, maybe succeed, but over the long term, the way the world is heading, I think they are, like ostriches in the sand.
Yeah, totally, totally. And before you proceed further, because I've got one more question that I have to ask you before we move to the exciting express round.
Yeah.
Folks watching this, CII people and everyone else, no, I didn't ask Parmesh to speak about the fact that Avtar is a great consulting company and you should not look at your budgets when it comes to Avtar. And B, yes, we do work with the Godrej Group. And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And they have won a ton of awards. And one of the things that's so, so special to our hearts is when one of those awards was presented in my presence by another forum where I was there. And, the fact that two amazing women from your factory came and then they received that award for moving from 0 to 20 in a space of, a year.
Yeah.
And so it's wonderful and exciting when you work with organizations that have that heart. So it's lovely working with you, Parmesh. So I just wanted to say that and get it out of the way. Now, my next question to you before the rapid fire round, before the express round, you talked about companies, looking at tracking the success of the initiatives.
Yeah.
Now, one of the stuff that we find, or rather we used to find very difficult was, first of all, talking about the business case.
Yeah.
You go to a company and then they ask you about what's the business case and all that. We moved beyond that phase of the business case. Then came the ROI phase.
Yeah.
Then, today we are in this thing of saying, how successful is my DI initiative? So what do you do? How do you actually track and measure it? Because it's long term, right? It is something that you have to look at, in a longitudinal way. You can't just say, yesterday you did the training program, today everybody became inclusive. Yesterday you delivered a session and today everybody walked out being allies. That's not really, yes, sessions have to be powerful. They have to be emphatic. They have to be very, very thought-provoking, and they have to get people to really believe in what's being told. But change cannot happen overnight. So how do you track, the success of initiatives, and especially with something, what you did at Culture Lab and now at the DEI Lab? How do you do that, Parmesh?
We track, we measure whatever can be measured. We put it in our annual report every year, which is open for the general public to see. We have a quarterly DI council in which every business presents. We have long-term 3-year AOPs, long-term plans, long-range plans for each company in terms of business, but for each company also in terms of DI as well, with very clear numbers, with very clear targets in terms of representation. We have strong budgets for each team. In fact, that's my other thing, that most DI teams are not staffed. We have across our Godrej Industries group, I think about 35 people who are working on DI across 6 group companies and the corporate center, because that's what it takes. There has to be someone to run programs. There has to be someone to do the data mining. There has to be someone to work with senior leaders. There has to be, last year we did a Pride March at our headquarters with 800 people marching through the building. There has to be someone to organize that Pride March and pay for the flag and the atrium and pay for the snacks.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying all of this costs.
Yeah.
And it needs teams to do it. So we are very committed to, resourcing for the initiatives, but also measuring what we do. And you can measure representation, you can measure attrition.
Yeah.
You can measure. So whatever can be measured, we measure. You can measure belonging. And I think what has worked
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever the world is measuring, we measure. But we go out there and we do more, because our lab is not just about, pushing a Godrej group of companies.
True.
So we measure what we do in terms of collaborating with others. So last year we collaborated with Khaitan to bring a law book for persons with disabilities. In fact, a couple of weeks ago we launched that. This year we're collaborating with Ashoka University, the center of SIDA, with Dr. Ashwini, whom I connected you to over email, who's doing amazing work with IIM Ahmedabad. So we also track our research collaborations. We track the outreach. We have just built a DI directory with over 500 resources that anyone, any student, any practitioner can use. We track downloads. When we do, stories, we're actually doing We've started a section called Spotlight where we focus on other organizations which are doing good work. We
Super.
track how many people use it. So we're
Fabulous.
tracking everything we do. We're tracking how we are shifting, our, numbers and mindsets inside the Godrej Industries group. But we're also really tracking, how we are shifting mindsets and attitudes across, because that's our aim, right? We have about maybe 50,000 people working at the Godrej Industries group.
Yeah.
That's, even if we are the best exemplar, even if we reach magical numbers here, it's still a drop. We have to shift the millions of people in our country. We have to bring millions of people into employment, right? Whether you work on returning women, there are so many talented returning women who are waiting to return. So, we have to do that. And that cannot be just one organization, which is, I'm so glad you're doing this with CII. Imagine if every CII member who's listening to this understands that if they hire more women, they hire more persons with disabilities, they hire more LGBTQ individuals, they hire more individuals from other traditionally disadvantaged communities, whether it's regional, whether it's religious, whether it's any other dimension, how much more talent they will be able to bring, how much more they will flourish. And that is the only way to create Viksit Bharat. We cannot create Viksit Bharat for like straight able-bodied men only. That's not how it works. Viksit Bharat has to be for everyone.
Absolutely. Viksit Bharat has to have the kind of inclusion that I think, today is probably the repository of a few set of people, crazy folks like you and me, who talk about it constantly. I think that has to really permeate every discussion about Viksit Bharat, because that's the only way we are going to be developed.
Yeah, so we measure everything. To answer you in short, we measure whatever can be measured.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
And we constantly come up with ways to measure what can't be measured also.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, now we're going to go into the express round.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a few questions. 3 or 4. Don't think too much about it and quickly give me your answers. First question. One DEI aha moment.
There were two. One is this Pride March that I spoke to you about. Where 800 people marching under a giant pride flag at Godrej 1, of whom maybe 100 and 200 happen to be LGBTQ. I was like, pinch me, is this really happening? But the second is, when we were, again, I mentioned this, last year we did a Women's Day at one of our oldest factories in Malanpur in MP, where we have gone from, 5 to 75 and are now going to 200, 300, 400 women in the workforce. But just being with so many women in the factory, and we call their families, we call their parents, we call their grandparents, we call their partners, just seeing that love and joy, seeing the fact that MP is not like Tamil Nadu, right? It's more challenging in that sense. To bring more women in the workforce in factories in Tamil Nadu is relatively easier.
Yeah,
but MP is a little harder in that sense. But to see the joy of the women who are working, to see the pride of their families in the fact that their wife, daughter, mother was working at an organization like Godrej. I mean, for me, I was like, it's just so magical. This is what we do. Because otherwise, these women would have not had the opportunity to, to thrive, to imagine, and how the whole ecosystem is benefiting in terms of that, right? So it was actually quite
gorgeous.
I think my aha moments are on a daily basis. When I see a person with disabilities who is flourishing, recently Sudhir Sitapati of Godrej Consumer Product did a LinkedIn post about how he did a market visit with Pritam, one of our employees who happens to be 100% blind, and how he learned so much about product marketing from seeing the distributor visit through Pritam's eyes, right? So to see senior leaders understand that, right? To me is that. So then it's not, we're not hiring persons with disabilities out of some, sense of benevolence. We're hiring persons with disabilities because that cohort is vital for our future success. And to see people get that, it's magical, right? Because now, recently I was talking to the MD of Nestle, who's like, I've had such success in my shop floor. He wants to hire hundreds of persons with disabilities in factories, right? To me, these are all aha moments that, these are wins that work matter.
Lovely, beautiful, gorgeous. Okay, here's another one. This might be tough for you, but I'm still going to go ahead and ask. Who's your role model when it comes to LGBTQ plus inclusion?
I'm going to make it easy. It's you, because what you've done for returning women, the way you struggled with all these odds against you, I remember our conversations where you told me about how bad you felt, for example, in your own career, when you couldn't go back to work, with all your talent, with all your potential, with all your desire to not just work but also contribute to our country's economy, make it better. And so how you just soldiered on, for so many years. So I think, a lot of my work is built on, the shoulders of early pioneers like you. And my role models today are people who are doing it. So as I'm becoming older, I'm becoming more impatient. So when I see people who are doing it, there are so many incredible people across India who are building infrastructures of inclusion, whether it is Saddam, who's building Yaol in Manipur, which is a trans organization which does everything from physical sports to mental health counseling to job fairs. Whether there's Dr. Ruwa Shadab, who is building a Muslim women leadership incubator. Whether it's like a Vineet Saraiwala, who's doing atypical advantage. I mean, there are so many incredible people across our country who are
Absolutely.
creating, solutions, systems, and possibilities. So, am I role models are
Calling
like,
out all their names, Parmesh. That's just that is inclusion, really.
yeah.
What you're doing, giving them their spotlight,
No,
in
I
for
just feel so lucky to be working alongside all these like amazing people, right? I'm like, wow, some of them are my friends. I can hang out with some of them. I can learn from some of them. What fun.
absolutely. Last one.
Yeah.
I loved this question, and we were putting it together. One piece of advice that you wish you had when you started out working in the DI realm.
Yeah.
One piece of advice that you wish you had been somebody had given you when you started working in this space of ours.
So I think that, and I wrote about this briefly in my book, the idea of cultural acupuncture. Acupuncture works when you press the right spot. So you don't have to press. The way to move mountains is not by trying to lift the whole mountain. It's trying to find, what point you can use like your stick almost as a lever to topple a mountain in that sense, right? And we have mountains of, say, bias, structure, hierarchy, misguided information, uh, hundreds of people who want to play devil's advocate and not let change happen, enough people who love the status quo, that we are against, right? So I wish I had learned that, find what point to press. You don't have to use your whole energy in trying to push the whole mountain. Find that one point. That because you push the right button and the mountain moves by itself. I found that the right button is often people at the top. So, and with people at the top, I have found that data does not work. What works are stories, and what works are their own family members telling them. We have to figure, what lever to use for who. For senior, I found with senior leaders, it is not necessarily data. It is a deep connect to the work they do and to the legacy they want to leave behind, some often for their families and children. So trying to work through that lens. With others, I mean, I wish I'd done that, because earlier on I was trying to do too much. I was trying to change everyone's mindsets. I was trying to shift everything. And now I feel like, you press the right button, then they will do the work by themselves. The second is that, our work is a fine balance between patience and impatience, anger and compassion. And we should use all these emotions. We are not all Mother Teresa types. So we shouldn't always be, kind and sweet and compassion. There is a time for anger. There is a time for irritation. There is a time for like, no, I don't want to repeat to you for the 100th time why a woman who returns after pregnancy is not a demerit.
This was such a clarion call to people of our discipline of
Yeah.
the DI world, for them to really do a beautiful mixing of the yin and the yang within themselves to bring out the most effective, change and transformation that they can see, that they can create and make happen. This was so lucid. It was both simple and profound at the same time. And I just loved this conversation with you, Parmesh. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being on this show. And, there are very few moments where one really feels blessed that, there are others as well who are plowing along in this journey of creating a Viksit Bharat,
Yeah.
which actually is built by making sure that everybody gets a platform to rise on. So
Yeah.
this was awesome. Thank you so very much.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you.
And more power to the next 25 years, 50 years, 100 years of Avtar.
Thank you, Parmesh.
Yeah, and lots
Thank
and
you
lots
so
of love.
much. Thank you so much. Folks, that was me in a conversation with Parmesh Shahani, who actually heads Godrej's DEI Lab and is also the awesome author of Queeristan. Someone who speaks so beautifully, magically, and I think this podcast is just one small sample of his legendary articulation skills. And I'm sure each of you would have benefited out of just listening to all of that, which was packed in this half an hour, 40-minute conversation that we had. Until next time, bye-bye. See you.